Ну що ж, дорогі друзі і подруги, перш ніж представити нашого хедлайнера, сьогодні я хочу наголосити на тому, що команда CANactions вміє досягати неможливого. Перше неможливе – зібрати на одному фестивалі, який триває 2 дні, кращих теоретиків і практиків архітектури та урбанізму зі всього світу. Друге неможливе – зібрати тут кращу, активну та творчу молодь зі всієї України. І третє неможливе, щоб ви розуміли, о 18:15 цей літак приземлився у Борисполі. За годину і 5 хвилин цей чоловік мусив пройти митні контролі, отримати багаж, знайти таксі, доїхати з Борисполя до Києва, а в Києві уже до Мистецького арсеналу. При цьому всьому команда CANactions мусила перевірити його презентацію, пояснити йому, що тут відбувається, ну і якось причепурити. Готовий та причепурений засновник архітектурного бюро TOPOTEK 1. Один з найвідоміших проєктів цього чоловіка – це суперкілен у вже згаданому Копенгагені, данській столиці. Ну, словом, чого мені довго говорити. Хедлайнер сьогодні, один з хедлайнерів сьогоднішнього дня, Мартін Rein-Cano, з'являється на цій сцені під ваші бурхливі оплески. Ще бурхливіші. Прошу.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here. And so, yeah, I need to drink a sip of water first. Sorry. Yeah, I came directly from the plane, so yeah, happy to be here. It's really. I'm always amazed by this kind of events, this kind of congresses. We all know how much it is to organize them and how important they are for exchange of ideas and for learning from each other. So, and this is maybe also what values are about. Values are also about questioning things, no? And as you might know, and this is also the title of the presentation, I'm a landscape architect, and we deal mostly with public spaces. 90% of the jobs we do is public spaces. And the public space, to a certain extent, is a place in which you can exercise conflicts, little dramas, big dramas, like on Maidan, you know. These spaces are the spaces where political activism can happen. So that is so relevant to have them. And so as I said, I'm a landscape architect, so I thought I would, as probably most of you are architects, I thought I'd give you a little introduction to my profession. And so the first garden, and it was a garden and not a house, is the Paradise Garden. And the Paradise Garden is this place that in the end is this human fantasy of a perfect space, you know. It's not wild, but it is a little bit wild. It's not dangerous. You're outside, the temperature is perfect, you can be naked. So a little bit is like the belly of your mother, you know. This place that no one of us can remember because we didn't have any needs there, you know. It was never cold, never warm, we were never hungry. And so a little bit of this religious idea of going back to this origin has to do with the garden. So that the garden is kind of the first space of human being. This, let's say, a twilight space between nature and culture, this thing that is both, like we humans are both. We are somehow wild and cultivated. And so that's how it starts, and then it goes on as we are not God. You know, the first landscape architect was God. He did the Paradise Garden. And but as we don't have his possibilities, we have to play with other methods. And these other methods often are related with scale, you know. Things in gardens are always fantasies that get turned and transformed into things that are smaller or bigger than we are. And actually, there should be a movie playing now, but it's not. Let's try again. If it works. Nope, it doesn't seem to work. However, it's a little bit like Alice in Wonderland, you know. Alice in Wonderland is also this kind of twilight space that in which we are in a different world. So gardens are also different worlds. They are not pure reality, but places of other places. And in this kind of optical illusions become a very important formal part of our work. And so as I said, we are going to rush pretty fast through the history of landscape, and maybe the most important style or the most important time of landscape architecture is the Romantic, and two heroes of that time were two painters, Claude Lorrain and the other guy was called Nicolas Poussin, and these two guys did this kind of total eclectic paintings, a total mix of super different spaces, okay? Because gardens often have been done to create reality. You know, gardens, the interesting thing about gardens is that because they have plants, they seem to be more real, let's say, than maybe buildings, no? So when you were looking to create roots, to give yourself a certain importance and an identity in a place, you would build a garden. And that was also not only for people, but also for states. You know, if you think of the absolutism of the Baroque garden, you know, so the garden was actually the showpiece, showing when the King of France would have visitors, it would to show off and to show what he was capable of doing with the space and how he could dominate nature. And the same in the end for the English landscape garden. But the big difference is that this garden was an eclectic mix. And what is interesting is that the beginning of this garden is a mediatic beginning. So gardens are kind of faked realities, but they are still real. You know, they always kind of tilt between being faked, but also being totally real, because the plants can only be dominated to a certain extent. And this idea of what is first, is the object first or the copy for the gardens, or in that case is really interesting because the pictures were done before the gardens were done that looked like the pictures. So some English aristocrats saw these pictures and thought, wow, I would like to have gardens that look exactly like that. Yeah? And as I said, these places were total mix. The landscape suddenly became a possibility. The landscape in the Baroque was kind of outside. Suddenly the landscape became part of the view, and you could mix all sorts of things. You could have the Vesuve, which is in Napoli, the Castle of the Angel, which is in Rome, suddenly all together. So you could mix the things the way you wanted. And this is actually what then happened in the English Landscape Park, is a mix of all these different styles all put together. But what is again very interesting is that let's say the natural causality of things was changed. As I said beforehand, you would have thought that the object, the reality would come before the picture. In that case, the landscape garden is a copy of something that never existed in reality. So we have a kind of a change of direction. Something that might seem for us totally natural nowadays, because we're used to this kind of fakes, and we don't know actually what the original actually was, and when the copy started to be a copy, and when the copy used to be an original. So maybe this Romantic movement was the beginning of this kind of dynamism between reality and abstraction, reality and fantasy, reality and fake. And another thing that is very relevant for the English landscape garden, well, one thing, as I said, has to do with scale. So everything is out of scale. The other thing is also that nothing is really what it seems to be. So obviously this temple is not Greek. It's just a bad copy of a Greek temple. But also, what is also interesting, that most of the architectures, like this kind of Palladian copy, but even the trees, you know, this is a Lebanon cedar that happens to be planted in this garden. All these elements were coming from foreign countries. So there were no tree in the English garden that was English, and actually also all the objects, all the little architectures are actually not English. Today we call this garden English, okay? And that shows how relevant and how capable of manipulation identity is. Something that was totally foreign suddenly became the archetype of Englishness, of space and of style, if you want. No? And this kind of copy-paste strategy. You will see in the project I'm going to show to you a relevant strategy for us. The question appears to us, if we think of migration as one of the themes that I'm going to talk about today, if, for example, this Lebanon cedar, there's no better places for Lebanon cedars to grow than England, no? And the question is this Lebanon cedar actually foreign? I mean, it was brought to England when it was a little baby plant, maybe only a seed, and grew in miserable English weather. And it's very, very happy there, as you can see. So is this plant English, or is this plant still foreign, or is it actually a hybrid between places, no? And so, and all these questions of belonging, of identity, are relevant to us. Besides that, the other thing that is interesting for us is, let's say, as a strategical piece of work, the English landscape garden introduced something that was new those days and was also part of the development of the Industrial Revolution, and this is dynamic. So the Baroque garden that you probably have pictures of, these cutted hedges, was very static. No? So the hedges, the plants were stopped, they wouldn't be allowed to grow naturally. They would be cutted to stay always the same. So in the English garden, it was the opposite. They tried to enforce even the forces of nature, the dynamism of nature. So you would so if it would be spring, it would be more spring than usually. If it would be autumn, it would be more red than usually, etc. So it was a kind of hyper nature, a kind of loud tuning of a natural picture. And then the other thing that is also very relevant, and maybe common to us today, is that this garden you only can experience in motion. We speak of this garden as the picturesque in sense of picture, because you would walk, like in these pictures that I showed you before, you would walk from one picture actually to the next. And doing that, it would become a kind of a film, because one picture after the other creates a sequences of pictures. And in that respect, this kind of space, time continuum that this garden is, becomes a predecessor of the film. So instead of the film running in front of you, you walk through the film. And it would be really a 3D film, You can smell the film, you can eat something out of the film, and you also would be part of the film. And that sense maybe only happens today, when also the borders between the actual producers and the consumers, the actual actors and the consumers, is getting more and more fluid, So who is producing for Facebook? Who is looking Facebook? Where are the borders actually that used to be so incredibly clear? And this dissolution of borders had a big push in the time of the Industrial Revolution, and the English garden is a child of this dynamism. And as I said, in the Baroque was more of a frame for the happening of the state, for the theater of the state of the king. The English garden was a place that you only could experience if you would walk through it and would have all these different sceneries shown to you. So you would be walking actually through a picture. So you would be part of a real Photoshop situation, if you want. So these very mediatic elements are really important. And it was even to have, this picturesque experience, you would even have a cloth glass. This cloth glass was actually just a mirror, and as a garden, usually, etymologically, garden comes from guard. You would have a wall around the garden, normally. But in the English landscape garden, the wall was destroyed, and they created some kind of holes in the edge of the garden that you would overlook. They call them ha-ha or aha, so that in the end, also this border between the actual garden, and the surroundings would be dissolved. And like a picture, as it's only a picture, like the garden is only a garden if there's a wall around it, otherwise it becomes landscape. A picture is only a picture if it has a frame and it has an end. So what they did is to have this device, this cloth glass, that is just a mirror with a frame around it, and they would sit down somewhere with a special beautiful setting, and then they would admire the landscape and would show it to maybe a friend who would be with them, But they also could use it moving with it. So that you would have the future in front of you, the present where you would be standing, and the past behind you. So you would have this kind of time-space continuum that I was talking about beforehand. And in the end, if you want, this mirror is also a kind of an augmented reality device, maybe similar to this guy that we are all used to have. So it's a kind of a Google Earth, a very early Google Earth thing, no? That you make your own reality, you make your picture that you are interested in. So this personalizes in the same time the experience that you would have in this garden. So a lot of elements here are really interesting. And this kind of mediatic experience that the picture is first before the identity is being created. This is a very common public relation strategy. So no one would go to the Rocky Mountains before Anselm Adams would have taken pictures of it. So the picture actually created the desire. And the English landscape garden is in the same time picture and reality. Again, something that for us might sound totally common because we all move in some kind of in-betweenness of reality and fantasy. But if we imagine that happening 200-300 years ago, and also if we imagine that the solution of the wall happened 200-300 years ago, if you think of architecture that only happened in the Bauhaus, what is barely 100 years ago from now. So there is an incredibly radicality in this time, but as it has been copied a lot, and it became an archetype. That's the reason we all think of this kind of gardens as a kind of a kitsch, because the whole world, if we want, has become a kind of a landscape garden through which we can walk or move in different velocities. So, I don't know, it's not very well, it's not very visible, but this is Rocky, this is Sylvester Stallone walking up the steps of, towards the museum, the art museum in Philadelphia. And you know, I don't know. I mean, you're a pretty young audience, so you might not know him. But he was like in the 60s, in the 70s, an American hero. You know, rewriting the American dream from being poor. If you fight for your cause, you will make it, etc. So for a whole generation, this guy became incredibly relevant. No, and so Philadelphia, for those that are not common with American history, is a very important city in terms of American history. It was the first capital of the United States. The American Constitution was made there, etc. So this is a very important place. A lot of people come to visit, and they also have this incredible museum, so there's a lot of visitors coming to here. And when they go and visit this place, they also can visit a statue of Rocky, you know. And but Rocky actually never existed. It's just a very bad actor with Italian origin, you know. So we are having the same kind of shift, that something that actually didn't exist, that is just a picture, becomes reality. And you know, and these kind of things, that things start to get mixed, and the borders that we were used to have start to disappear, is also part of our manipulation of identity. So if something is, if a film becomes so relevant for reality, the film also becomes reality, no? And this is another story. This is in New Zealand. You know, when the people who did the Hobbit movie were looking for a site to do the movie, they discovered that New Zealand would be a good place because it's very green and whatever. So they built this village in New Zealand for the Hobbits. And but then there were so many fans. They actually wanted to destroy it after the movie was over, but then a lot of people were starting to come to see this the village, because they were so fascinated by the movie, so that then in the end they kept actually this place, and suddenly this is like 100% pure New Zealand, you know. It's like the cedar or the English park being totally foreign becomes suddenly autochthonous of England, and so are the Hobbits suddenly 100% New Zealand. And even the Air New Zealand is the official airline of Middle Earth. No? So there you can see how realities, filmic realities, real realities, identities of places can be changed, okay, and can be, in the end, manipulated in different ways. No? And well, let's see, this movie seems to be working. So this is Easy Rider. You know, speaking of, I said beforehand, the whole world is a kind of an English landscape garden, a borderless space through which we experience, actually, as I said, in a kind of time-space continuum. As far as we're moving, actually, we feel comfortable, and that's also the way we experience space. So it's not static anymore, and every place, if you can walk through it, if you can drive through it, becomes in the end also a visitable space, and in those terms also, if you want, an English landscape park. The only difference between let's say, the bike and going by foot or by horse is just the different speed that you would have. And this kind of filmic experience that we will have, that we will also be copying. So people go to this route, actually put the same music on to actually replicate the experience, you know. So, and that we have constantly when we drive in a car, when we do sports, we always have our filmic augmented reality device on us, where we can put the film music actually on, that we actually want to create always our own private movie, depending in which mood, in which situation we are. So this is the story behind the English landscape garden, that in my opinion started with the English landscape garden, the solution of borders, of distances, of relations between reality and fantasy, and that makes, actually, as we all know, very difficult to differentiate also between fake news and real news, as we can see in the White House, in the Oval Office today. So, and one of the issues that have to do also with the Industrial Revolution have also to do with immigration. So we see also in terms of immigration big moves happening around the world, also in a very, very dynamic way, and being maybe, especially for the rich countries, this is the only drama that we have. You have other dramas here. You're poor, so you still have kind of classical dramas. We have the drama that we have to take poor people like you guys coming to us, yeah, and also darker people than you, yeah. So and we have to deal with them, no. So this is the drama of the developed countries, and kind of a natural development, no, because always humans have been driven by going into places where they could have better food, better chances, better whatever. So we are not trees, we have legs, so we can move between places. And the question is, in terms of this movement, which kind of, let's say, strategies could be driven to make certain processes that are actually common to human history, to make these processes become maybe a little bit accelerated or a little bit cultivated, so that some of these processes can be influenced to become better. So, however, as you can see, Germany, where I live, is one of the most, the Russian Federation too, a lot of Ukrainian probably going there, but Germany comes next. So we are the third most immigrated country too in the world, with a netto of 1 million a year, what is an enormous amount, thinking of a place of 80 million people. So, however, one thing so that also changed in terms of immigration, you know, immigration used to be a one-way street. People used to decide, I go to America, and they would never return, you know, so they would be there, and maybe the first generation would struggle, but then they would more and more mingle into the whole thing and become Americans in the end. Now we have a situation in which people actually are in a kind of constant move. We are all in a kind of constant migration mood, if you want, you know. Thank you to Ryanair and EasyJet and other very cheap moving devices that we have today, and also to the influence of English as a common language. We are starting to move more through the world, but it's not anymore that we move in one direction and we stay. We change. So maybe we go to study and live for 2-3 years somewhere else. Maybe we marry there and get kids. Maybe not. Maybe we go back. So in the end, it's not anymore that we even spend a whole life in a place. And also we know the migration between villages, between the countryside and the cities. We know, as I said, between poorer countries and richer countries, etc. So, or in my case, for example, this kind of wandering Jew attitude that I've taken for me, so that I barely are more than 2 or 3 days in Berlin. So I am, or when we do tourism, we are a kind of a small immigration. So we are more and more moving in this kind of constant time-space continuum, and the question is, what kind of spaces are needed for this kind of issues? The reaction of Europe, as you might have heard, is tendentially a protecting one, a rejecting one that actually tries to repress certain attitudes, because people come to us, but also we are happy to have them. Without all the people coming to us, our economies also wouldn't be working, so we require them to come. But on the other side, so we want their workforce, but we don't always necessarily want, we want them to clean our house, but we don't want necessarily them to have to wear this ugly stuff. No? So, and well, depends on who is under it. No? I sometimes would love to have one of these things. You know, when I do presentations like today, I would love to have a burqa actually, to hide behind it. So, however, in France, the burqa was forbidden. So in the end, it's a very classical repressive attitude towards immigrants. And in Switzerland, the minarets were forbidden. You know, actually, it was a movement developed by architects and city planners, saying that the minarets actually don't fit into the Swiss cities. And I don't know if you've ever been to Switzerland, but they don't have cities actually. They have villages and mountains. Yeah. So I think the whole argumentation doesn't really work here. But however, it's and if you look at the picture, they look like Pershing, like rockets, you know. And this was put on to election, and it was voted for by the people with big majority to forbid minarets in Swiss cities. So they have to build their minarets outside the cities. So in the end, if you would think of developed countries like Switzerland, like Germany, like France, being constitutional countries with equal rights for everyone, I would say this proves that this is not the case. So we have a repressed group of people, very simple story, always the same story. People with less force are being oppressed by people with more force, and this is a story of Europe. But the other story of Europe is also a story of emancipation. So we always had repression in Europe, but we always learned to, through a processes of big sufferings, to overcome this kind of oppressive attitude. So you are probably know about the proletarians, that they emancipated on some point through big revolutions. We know about the women, first of all becoming the right to vote and then having equal rights, but still today women are being paid less in average in Germany, for example, than men. We even have the emancipation of children now. You know, you can't hit your children anymore, what is a pain in the ass, but that's how it is. And so all the different groups now are getting emancipated. But when it comes to the immigrants, I think this didn't happen yet. And so, and in the end, Europe has like two chances in terms of this, for Europe, biggest social conflict right now. There are two ways of dealing with it. One is to wait till the emancipation explodes in revolution and with violence, or let's say to do a cultivated evolutionary emancipation, like we have seen actually with women. The women didn't kill their man. Sometimes they should have, probably. Well, sometimes they actually did, but not often enough maybe to make a real revolution, you know. So, and but if Europe doesn't take a more cultivated approach to these issues, this kind of turmoils, like we have seen them already in France and in England already happening, will happen also in places like Germany or Switzerland. So. I like the idea that this is the Prime Minister of Norway. This is a sentence, a quote by him: "We are still in shock, but we will not abandon our values. Our answer is more democracy, more openness, more humanity." And I was Googling values when I've been invited here, because it's the title of, so, and that sentence came up and I thought that's actually perfect. So, and I think this is a very ethical approach. It's a very, strong, a strong belief in values, so that if things happen to us, like bomb attacks, like all these things that we have seen from Islamists or all other things, that the answer shouldn't be that we create more repression and we create more police and we create more security, but actually that we create more openness, more humanity, and more democracy. Because in the end, it was also proven. It's proven that the forces of repression always try to misuse any kind of attacks to control the people in a better way, you know. But real democracies, good places for foreigners, for immigrants, but also for people from the places, are places where democracy and humanity exists. So all that was the introduction actually to present you a project. It's a project that we did together with Big and Superflex in Copenhagen. It was a competition. The area in which this competition happened to be, it's called Nöbro, and this area is 99% immigrant neighborhood, and the competition, it was a competition for a park, and the task of the competition, the program of the competition, what they were asking us to do was to deal and to try to help the situations of the immigrants in this neighborhood. So, and looking at this introduction that I gave you, we had like two major components to work with this place. One was the idea, formally the idea of the history of landscape architecture in terms of the English landscape garden. Is it possible to update the idea of mixing things from very different places to create something new that then becomes whatever, okay? So is it possible to update that? That's what we tried here. Second, so instead of having temples being approached, it would be much more things of every day. Secondly, the idea of emancipation, the idea of the possibility of immigrants to have a chance to show themselves and to connect with the people of Denmark, of Copenhagen in that special case. So. This is the Baltic Sea in the back. Here you see the space of Superkiln in front. Superkiln means super wedge because it has this kind of wedgy form, and it used to be a tram line that was closed in the 60s that would go all around Copenhagen and was, as I said, was taken out. So it was an open space beforehand, and it became, and that was what the competition was for, was that bit from here to here. And so the idea that we developed was actually trying to do a space. You know, one of the things that we when we were trying to understand what the dreams of the population were here, one of the things when it comes to immigration, you know, when you immigrate to a country, you most of the time just take your body with you. You know, the things. Let's say the things for which you also might have a fetish. For example, certain buildings in your city that you'd keep as a memory. If you stay in the city, these places will be there always with you. You know, they are a kind, we have a nice German word, it's called Grundrauschen. They create this kind of ethers, you know, ether. You know, this kind of, this commonness, this idea of that we feel at home, you know, smells are right, places are right, so we know everything that we see. When you move from a country, you actually don't have all of that. Yeah? And so this was one thing. So the idea was that we said, actually, we should try to get all the objects, objects from people, memories of people, proposed by the people onto that space. The next thing that is relevant when it comes to immigration is translation. You know, when you learn a new language, you start to also learn a little bit your own language because you kind of go back and forth between the languages and you start to learn about you, but you also you start to transform yourself the way you think because the new language gives you also new perspectives on certain things. And so that we said these objects should also be translated. They should be put from one place to another, you know. And not only our mind starts to change when we learn about a new language, a new culture, also our body starts to change. You know that depending which language you use most, also the muscles in your face start to change. That's the reason Americans all look like potatoes, you know, independently of the race, you know, because they are rah, 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 yeah, because they speak here. They have this hamster thing, yeah, down here. Or that's also, to be more racistic, the French, for example, they all, you know, they have all these beautiful lips without using Botox, like you guys and the Russians do, yeah? And you know why? Because the only nation that actually farts when they speak. I don't know, you have to pay attention to that. They say, ah, pff, yeah? So, and that's one of the reasons they have these beautiful lips. So as you can say, and we Germans, I don't want to tell you, and you Ukrainians, I don't know how you transform yourself through your language, but However, so what I wanted to show is that this not only that this kind of interaction between the reality of your body, also obviously body language. If you move to Italy, you are going to have another body language than if you move to Germany, probably, etc. So, however, your body changes. So in this process of change, I thought this is maybe similar to the process of change that you would have maybe in a park. So you are a Lebanon cedar, but you are becoming somehow English in the same time. So we said all these objects that are brought from different countries are not only transported one-to-one from that country to the place in Copenhagen, but they go through a process of transformation, of translation, as I said. And it's similar maybe to the temple in the English garden. You know, the temple was Greek, but it was done with English stone, and it was done in a wrong scale. So it was in the same time. It has a kind of a English materiality, but a foreign symbolism. And it was both things at once. And in the best of the cases, that's what we humans are. We don't need to be just one thing. You don't have to decide that you are just Ukrainian or just Russian or just German or just one thing. You can be several things. It's totally allowed and totally welcome. Okay? So, and this is also that only, obviously, if you just grow up in a country and never are exposed to these kind of situations, you never maybe need to think of that. And also that can be misused by political parties. We call that fascism, by the way. To tell people if they are especially white or especially Ukrainian that they're better than if they're Russian or German or Jewish or whatever. So, and the idea was that maybe the English landscape garden and this kind of transition, transformation idea could be a good reference for us to work here. So, however, we had this kind of 100 nations that that live here, and the idea was that like all the population in the area contextually is foreign. All the objects in this park are foreign. So there is no litter bin, there is no playground object, there is no lamp, there is even not a sewage cover on the space that is actually Danish. So even, and obviously also not the plants, all the trees that we have planted here. So what happens is that you have a kind of a déjà vu, a kind of a non-place experience in this space. You don't know where you are, because the references that you would usually have as a Dane when you go to a Danish space is at least to find, you know, these everyday objects like the bollards or, I don't know, certain lamps, certain things that are being used everywhere, you know. So we said, no, this space of the city should be taken out of the banality of every day and be filled with banality of other places from all around the world, yeah. And part of this banality is also advertisement, you know. I could see coming from the airport, we have a very beautiful sequence of advertisement billboards, about 100, I would say, on each side of the highway. And so these things become more and more part of reality, so that we said we also would like to have these kind of things incorporated into our space. Yeah? So the square, the park is like 3 different areas that are partly separated by streets. We have a red park, a black park, and a green park. And as I said, as all that was happening in Denmark, they have a strong tradition of participation. And the question was also, you know, participation is something that you actually also need to learn. You know, if you're poor and you're an immigrant, you give a fuck what happens in your park, with all respect, you know. So you have other problems. Maybe you are illegal, maybe you don't have a job, maybe you are fearing for someone who was left behind, etc. So the idea of this participation that the Danish have is done for this kind of totally overfed social democratic children who drink Danish milk from the very first day of their life, okay? So these people don't. They partly don't speak Danish, but they also don't know how to participate. This is also an educative process. So we had to find another strategy to make them participate. And we thought, you know, what would we enjoy most when it comes to project? And I must say, my biggest joy is when I see things that have been running through my mind, through our work, but kept abstract, when they finally came to be real in space. When you see the things in reality that you thought of, and suddenly they are built, that is the biggest joy that you can have as an architect or as a landscape architect or whatever. So we thought, but usually in terms of participation, you let the people participate in the most boring stuff, you know, in discussions, you know, and all this stuff that is a kind of pretty free of joy in the end, if you want. No? So we thought maybe instead of letting them participate in the joy-free space, let's participate with them in the more joyful thing that is this kind of creation, you know. And so we said, So this was part of it. So these objects were also part of this kind of hedonistic participation, if you want, to share the joy with the people that we would feel as designers. Instead of trying to discuss with them, do you want a tree here? Do you want a playground? Do you want parking? All these usual things. So the end of this story was that we set up a homepage where people could propose objects from their countries, which didn't work very well, because also obviously they wouldn't be searching for the homepage and doing that. We had a lot of announcements in newspapers, we had posters put up, etc. But also we had 5 people, 5 translators, going from apartment to apartment, talking to the people and asking them to propose objects for the space. Yeah? And so these are the objects. We have nearly 100 objects from 100 different places. Most of them were done in Denmark. So this is one of my favorite objects, actually. This was one of the stories. This was this guy from Muscat. We were knocking on his door, you know, going from apartment to apartment and asking him, where are you from? I'm from Muscat, blah, blah. Don't you have something to give to us? We would like to have one of your objects from your country in our park. And he said, oh no, leave me alone. I am tired, yeah, go home. But then it happened that the translator knew him, yeah, and then they started to talk without us knowing what they were talking about. And then he brought a pile of photographs out to the door, and one of these photographs was this sign, and he said actually his uncle is a dentist and he paid for him to go to Denmark. So we said, well, that looks really cool. We would like to have that for our space. And here you can see these kind of ideas of translation. So suddenly something that is clearly foreign becomes also Danish. You know, it has this kind of Scandinavian coldness, no, in comparison to this dirty thing, no. So it is both things. It is foreign and it is local in the same time, you know. And this was what, and it also changed the scale, like in an English park. And obviously, one of the most important things, probably when it comes to tolerance between different cultures, is also to use humor and to also laugh about yourself. You know, for certain people, maybe a half moon with a star has an enormous relevance. For other people, it doesn't have any relevance at all. So these kind of games and humor were important to us. So this star is not from Russia, but from America. This guy is also from America. And then we have the same situation like in the park, or as I said before, where is the border? So can I buy donuts here? Can I buy a car here? The French do very bad cars, actually. Buy German cars, they're much better, yeah? So where is the reality? So we had situations, people stopping here actually and looking for the donut shop, yeah? But it's part of the park. So suddenly the borders between what is commercial, what is private, what is fun, what is not fun, start to get dissolved. And maybe, you know, in terms of time, maybe this will be, because it's built very, very well, as I said, it's like Scandinavian quality. It's going to be maybe the last donut sign in the world. So Americans are maybe going to come to Denmark to see the last donut sign existing. Another nice story is the story of the bull of Andalusia. You know, in the Spanish mountains down in the Mediterranean, they used to have these bulls set up in the landscape, and it was part of an advertisement campaign by a cognac brand, yeah? And they used to put them there, Osborne they were called, yeah? But then they thought it's not modern anymore, like, I don't know, 10 years ago they thought we don't need them anymore, and we take them away. But it was, this bull became so much part of the emblematic qualities of this landscape that, you know, the Germans and the Dutch, when they would be driving down to the coast, they wouldn't know where to stop if the bull wasn't there. So they all fell into the Mediterranean and died. So, and because the Spanish state didn't like this happening, because they wouldn't have any income with all these tourists dying in the sea, they decided to buy the rights for the bull and put the bull again in the landscape without being any more an advertisement for the brandy anymore, but now suddenly an icon of the landscape. Obviously the bull was there before the brandy firm, that's also true, but however, that shows how things can become different things, and that, let's say, attributes to things are not naturally given, but made and also part of a process that can happen, but also can be manipulated, as we are showing here. So we have all these different signs from different places. So if you're Chinese, you know what they're trying to sell to you. If not, not. This is a typical situation. These bollards are from Ghana. There are a lot of Ethiopian immigrants in the area. I don't know if you can see that, but you know, we in Germany, we have big cars, as you all know. We drive these fat, beautiful cars. In Denmark, they have huge prams, you know, for the babies. I don't know if they have such fat babies, but they have huge prams, yeah. And usually in a Danish pram there would be one fat blonde child. But I don't know if you can see this immigrant has 4 children in that one pram. So this is the demographic future here, anyway. So speaking of the solution of borders, we also started to think that the space is not only 2-dimensional, but also grows into the 3rd dimension. The idea of colors, of something very immediate, something that should happen right away. There's no time. You know, when we talk about parks, when I went to school, my professors used to tell me, with parks you need time and you have to wait because blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, this one that didn't have the time for that. We wanted it to be instantly working. So that's also the reason we use all these bright colors. So it would be immediately showing off and helping to change the situation in this. This is the opening. Yeah. There is also an app, so it's a little bit like the cloud glass that I explained to you beforehand, so you can have also an augmented reality and use, let's say, another level of information, so you can, the objects have very, very small signs that are barely visible, but you can use a Superkillen app to look at their, where they are from and where the history is, who proposed them, etc. This is an object from, Uzbekistan. Yeah. So these are the different things. This thing is from Iraq. So as I said, 5 of the objects, we had these 5 translators. I told you about the story with a half moon, and we got a foundation helping us to finance 5 trips to get 5 of the objects from their original places, let's say, symbolically to get them. So the people who proposed 5 objects, we did a big trip with them and went to their countries to get the objects. One of them is this loudspeaker from Jamaica. And the idea was not only you need to create a public space in the public space, but you need to create a certain attention and, let's say, a certain narrative for spaces. The significance, as I said, is so important that if you find a place without significance, you have to overload, actually, it with significance. You have to put the program into it. So you had the hardscape, but you needed to put the program into it. So all these kind of happenings around this space were kind of the programming of the space. And one of them was these trips to get these things. I will show you later. But this loudspeaker and also the box ring have another level of relevance. You know, we are used, when we deal with spaces traditionally, we learned that we have to pacify spaces. We have to solve problems. But in the end, I think that our responsibility today is maybe more than solving problems, is to cultivate problems in many situations. Because cultivated problems is actually what has character, what has identity, you know, everything, otherwise everything looks everywhere the same, otherwise everything looks like an airport that can be anywhere, no? So the conflicts, if they don't kill you, they can, in the best of the cases, become part of your character. But also if you work in an area where there are so many conflicts, you can't just do a peaceful park and hiding them and faking them, and there is no problems here, you know, so and putting them in the back. Because in the end, the problems also can become part of their solution, becoming a kind of catalysating process, you know. So that's also the reason we built this box ring here. There is a lot of aggression in this neighborhood, as I said, and violence. So, and you know, but if you think of 2 guys hitting each other on the face on bare ground, this is actually a crime, no? You go to prison for that, or have to pay, or whatever, yeah? But if the same thing happens actually 50 centimeters elevated with a little bit of strings around it, then it becomes sports, no? So sometimes it's also the change of perspective on things that actually make these things being changed. The way we look at them. And it's a little bit of we call it a psychoanalytical approach. In terms, you know, when you go to your shrink, to your psychoanalyst, he doesn't solve your problems. He just teaches you to live with them. Okay? And this is the same, I think, that is the best that we can do for places in many cases. It's not solving situations and dissolving qualities, because mostly when you solve, it's like when you, okay, if you have cancer, you have a chemotherapy. The chemotherapy not only kills the cancer, it most of the time also kills you, okay? So we work with spaces often, even if they don't have cancer, we always apply chemotherapy to spaces as planners, okay? And often much less is needed than a chemotherapy. And we have to see how to get a treatment in which also the good things are capable to survive and to recognize them. So this is a little bit maybe the approach to understand that. And the loudspeaker is the same story. The loudspeaker was a problem. People would complain about people being loud on the square beforehand, and we said, okay, instead of forbidding and repressing playing music on the space, we said we actually are going to cultivate the conflict. We have these huge loudspeakers, and you can play your music with an app, with a Superkillen app. You can play your music, so your private music becomes part of the public space. This idea of the solution of borders becomes part of the idea, like the boxing ring as well. Suddenly, things that are not common to that space become part of it, and in this process, we want to test how far we can go in normalizing certain things, or also abolishing them. So these kind of processes we want to enforce with this kind of installations. So the Danish women are trying too. This guy is better. Another story is the one of the Black Square. The Black Square was called Black Square before we came to work here. It was called Black Market because certain market, because it's a most important drug dealing space, still is in Copenhagen. And so usually you would try to say, let's try to keep it away, but we actually made it black again. So sometimes, let's say, also even a criminal past can become part of your official history. Look at England, no? They dominated half the world, and they're very proud of it, no? Without any remorse. So not necessarily bad things are things that have to be erased, but they can become part of you, of yourself and your identity. So one of the objects we put, however, in the Black Square is this octopus. Speaking of translocation or translation, sometimes things that are common in one place are totally special in another. So in Japan, every playground has an octopus, yeah, but in Denmark, no one. So so we built this was built also by the same Japanese firm, but as it was on the Black Square, we did it black, and you can see the users are starting to actually adapt to our color concept. So this is the Black Square. We also played with issues of second and third dimension. These lines, these height lines, are creating a slight optical illusion between something being totally flat and slightly ondulated. Yeah? Moroccan fountain, palm trees from China. Thanks to global warming, they can also exist now in Denmark. I was born in Argentina, so I proposed this one. In Argentina we love to barbecue, so I proposed these barbecues that were then put on the square, and it's one of the most successful objects on site. As again, speaking of racism, most of the time if you see people doing things, eating, cooking, behaving in a normal way, that creates more trust. If things happen behind walls, mostly that creates more rejection, as if they have the chance to have things done outside. So we have these chess tables here, so people have weddings here or celebrations for all kinds of things, because also most of these people who live in this area have often big families but small apartments, so that the need actually for these kind of spaces is really cool. So that they, like in the English Park, the users become actually also the event. So the Danish love to come here also to see this much more interesting way of using the public space that Danish people would actually otherwise do. So in the end, this is kind of the treaty here. So this one also, this was one of the objects that we also got. This is earth from Palestine. We had this strong Palestinian group. They proposed us to build one of these tunnels that go between Gaza and Israel, you know, where they transport the bombs under the earth to kill the Jews. And we said, maybe not such a good idea, but we like the idea of the earth that maybe was being taken out of the tunnel. So that we stuck with this idea, and so in the end, and you know, Earth, for many people, Earth is really related to where you come from, no, to your own country. So, and this is here you can see this is the Palestinian girls, the two Palestinian girls, while we were getting the earth that then was actually placed somewhere on the side. So many people just walk on it. Ignoring it, for some other people it's totally relevant. So, and this kind of tolerance between things is important. This is in Jamaica, getting the loudspeakers. This is the bull up here, yeah. This is the box ring in Thailand. This one is a box ring as well. Here's the bull with its balls. This is the two ladies putting the earth up. Yeah. This is from Venezuela. This Muscle Beach thing, yeah. He has the nicest landscape on his back. Basketball court in the green. So then we have the green part, Uzbekistan, as I said. This is another grill area in the green park. The donut sign, the bull on the hill. And this is also the half moon. And this guy is this is from Uzbekistan. And this one is like a Sovietic style, Islamic, I mean the best architecture the Soviets did are actually waiting houses for buses. I don't know why they put so much effort. No one did ever nicer bus stops than the Soviets actually. So this is one of them with a Islamic touch. And we said we liked it, so we copied it into that space. And it has a waiting sign that says bus stop. There is no bus stopping here, obviously, but it looks very nice. And and as I said, the narrative is such an important element of this, or was from the beginning such an important element of this project. I mean, we wouldn't have expected it to work as well, but it got an enormous amount of attention. So it's being shown, for example, in the official site of Denmark as a nation. So they show this piece of work. This is a symbol for immigration as part of the official site of Denmark as a nation. It's in the homepage of the city of Copenhagen. Obviously, it has a Wikipedia thing. It has over 5 million results. When you Google it, there are very few public spaces or open spaces that create so many results. It had a lot of exhibitions, publications, nominations, and prizes. Even CNN suddenly is interested in that space. It's calling welcome. The article is called "Welcome to Europe's Strangest Public Park." So in the end, suddenly an area in Copenhagen that was rejected out of the city for poor immigrants suddenly is interesting even on an international level. And now it's the 10th most visited touristic site in Copenhagen. So after you went to visit the Tivoli and the Marmite, etc., you end up coming here. So something that was totally unattractive suddenly is an attraction of its own. There's a book that I can recommend. By coincidence, when the iPhone 6 was presented and advertised, they did a competition. People were supposed to send pictures that they did with their iPhone. And there is a school next to our site. And because our project obviously is very photogenic, there's a school, a teacher took a picture, sent it in, and they used it. So then suddenly also the park is not only anymore in Copenhagen, but it hangs here at Alexanderplatz in Berlin, for example, in Hamburg, in wherever. Can't remember what this was. Where this was. This is in Japan. This one is in San Francisco on a highway. This one is in Los Angeles, in Hollywood. This is in Bogota, in Colombia. This is in Santiago de Chile, and then it was on the back side of the Süddeutsche. This is a German paper, but it was also on the back of the New Yorker. So in the end, and now it's being also used for other advertisement issues. So suddenly something becomes really breaks the borders of what actually a public space actually can be, a mix of filmic narratives, let's say, that create stories around things, and these stories are actually what makes places places. Thank you very much.
Той випадок, коли приватне стає публічним, і це безболісно. В нас зараз два варіанти розвитку подій. Варіант номер один – вечірка триває на подвір'ї мистецького арсеналу, але очевидно, що у вас, дорогі друзі і подруги, є руки і питання, про які ви тими руками засигналізуєте. От бачите, перше вже з'явилося. Прошу.
Hello, sir. Very good presentation. Thanks for that. And I have a question for you. Do you have some data about how this place lived after? Because a lot of touristic attention, and if there is still the place for people who live there, is the first thing. And the second one, if you make some analysis or something about the level of crime or some social interaction after. And the third part about the same question is if all your ideas, some social like experiments about, for example, this place for boxing from Thailand, if it's work like you think before you build it. Thank you.
Okay, I start from the back. Let's see if I remember all your questions. So the box ring actually is the proposal for, I forgot to tell you that, the proposal for the box ring was done by a Thai boxing club that is actually neighboring the space. So they are also kind of implementing it and have a certain ownership over it. So that's the reason it actually works. But there are also other clubs in the city, because boxing is a little bit of a dark sport too. So they're happy to have one space that is totally open and public. So many boxing clubs of the city go there to do trainings and to do show boxing as well, and also lead to tournaments. I think that worked very well. In terms of gentrification, that's I think your question regarding the tourism. The good thing is that in our strategy, the application of materials, of the way we did aesthetically the whole thing is also a little bit rough and ugly, you know. So that, and also the way the things that we did age is not exactly like a romantic patina, but more. It has a certain level of aggression, so that it still, I think, it didn't create really gentrification, in my opinion. In that respect. So it's not a classical park that you would say, I would love to have an apartment overlooking it, you know. And the third question regarding the crime, I mean, obviously a space like that is not going to solve all the social problems. Otherwise I wouldn't be standing here, no? I would be president of the United States or of Russia or something like that, yeah, if I would be such a magician. But in the end, it can just help. It's part of the process, you know. You can have processes civilized, or you can have processes make bigger by oppression, you know. So living it out a little bit, creating this kind of aesthetics of conflicts is part of the solution. But for me, this is more of a long-term project.
Thank you. Ще питання, заклики, освідчення. Є питання. І давайте під час відповіді ви все одно піднімаєте руки, я тоді ергономічніше до вас дістануся. Прошу.
Thanks for your lecture. The question is, you talk a bit about participation, and I'm interested about participational issues in this project, where just because of your passion, or is it a part of maybe governmental program? And is there some participational mechanisms in Denmark or in Germany or wherever you can tell about it?
Well, no, Denmark developed a very strong culture of participation since many, many years. The same for Switzerland, for Germany, and not as much, but also there we have a lot of rules and laws how to integrate the users into processes of public space. But most of these processes are, as I said, kind of very discursive. Usually there are kind of gatherings and discussions about things, Are they acceptable? Are they not acceptable? Is it what the people want? Is it not what the people want? You know, is this kind of more discursive thing? What we try to do here is kind of, and they're mostly a little bit painful, and also also in the more established discussion situations, you most of the time have like kind of professional participants. You know, people that like to participate, and they most of the time also have a certain agenda. So in the end, you don't get the real people who live there to join these meetings most of the time. Because again, in that case, all these people there are poor and have other problems. You know, they don't want to spend their afternoon in a discussion session, you know, about their park. So this maybe happens for bored people somewhere in the suburbs maybe, or if they have good jobs and they have good education, they might take the time to do these things. So I think that what is important is to create different strategy for different spaces in terms of design, but also in terms of participation. So there are a lot of standard participation procedures. Often, in my opinion, they are also a little bit faked, so that the politicians can say, we let the public participate, you know? So I always have the feeling that it's not really, because in the end, when it comes to it, it's not the public who decides what is going to be done, you know? So, and in that case, the guy from Morocco who proposed the fountain, it's his fountain, you know? But obviously it also speaks for a certain community, etc. So it's more immediate.
One more question.
Hello. I know the project was also made with the big, and I have seen some of his lectures. And he mentioned the one piece from Ukraine.
Yes.
Can you also mention that?
Yeah. We have also one piece from Ukraine that is not in the pictures. I should have put it in. No, that's true. Yeah, we have one piece from Ukraine too.
So, ще pieces of Ukraine в цьому залі. Ну, народ, superstar. Є ще одне питання.
And what is the material of surface? Is it soft or hard?
It's asphalt.
or-
It's asphalt with painting, with a coating.
Okay.
Coating.
And
The slope?
Yes.
That's asphalt. It's all asphalt with white lines on it. And the back is green, natural green.
And
Grass.
Exploitation is good?
Well, actually, as I said, it's going to be redone now. The red square especially is going to be redone because the colors are run off very fast, and the city wants to do something else. So it might become brick on some point because the city is fed up with having to repaint it. We are not totally happy about it, but it's maybe also part of the process. You know, that you say this very colorful moment was important for one moment, but maybe after 5 years, 6 years that the thing is there, maybe it can be something else. But it's successful enough that the city invests again a lot of money to make it very durable, you know?
Yes, and
so
we want to make the same thing in our project, and it was so expensive, so it's not working.
it is expensive, actually. We had a very good budget for this project, too. It looks cheap, but it was expensive.
Дякуємо. Ну що ж, п'ята рука, Віктор Зотов. Організація CANactions.
Не про то мова. What can you say about zoning? We know about hard zoning, soft zoning. Maybe you have your own vision, or you can propose what is your vision of trend in zoning, how to make zoning.
In parks or in cities?
For example, in this object in Copenhagen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't, well, whatever. I mean, it depends. Well, it's also a cultural thing, no? I mean, if you look, the most urban people are probably the Italians, and they have the smallest amount of green in their cities, but they use their cities and their public spaces like no one else does, no? And in Germany, for example, we have a lot of green. We actually like trees more than we like people, as you might know, yeah? But our urban, well, we have good cities, no doubt, but not comparison with Italians. So I think that it has a cultural background, which materials you like to use, and you think archetypical for a public space. But as I said, as many ideas are kind of circulating around the world, all these things are getting more and more mixed. And so that's also, I think, maybe the way also to deal with it. That it's good to have nice trees, and it's good to have hardscapes, and it's good to have grass, and it's good to have all sorts of things. I don't think that you need to decide for one or the other. I don't know if I'm answering your question, actually. No.
Yes, I see that is very visible. That is maybe no zoning at all in this
Okay.
object.
No, it's
yeah,
true.
that is was the
Okay,
reason
that was the
for
question.
my question. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, in the end, it had to do. This is part of the idea of the English park as well. That there is a kind of non-hierarchy, and if you think of all these different cultures, the idea for this space is also to give each culture, let's say, the same position in space, and not to say, okay, you know, and not to start to subdivide and say, okay, they have the nicer area and they have the ugly area and whatever. So everyone gets like kind of the same. And this idea of the fluent, that there is no borders, that we circulate also even between identities, you know. You are also someone else when you are 10 than when you are 50, you know. And you are someone else when you have kids than when you don't have kids. And you are someone else when you experience certain things in life than before, etc. So identity is not something that is given, and so is the idea for this space as well. That is kind of something that is in a constant flow. You know, the trees will grow. It's being transformed already. The paving is being changed now. So, and this is, to a certain extent, the nature of parks. Parks are always want-to-bes, and they're never finished. It's not like a house that is finished and over. But a park is always something that you also need to cultivate. To keep, and I think an identity maybe in character as well. You know, you can't rely just because you had a good or a bad childhood that you're going to be a good or a bad person. So you have to constantly work on yourself, you know, and this is the same for public spaces.
Thank you for your presentation, and I want to ask you, how long did you work for this project, and how many people work for it?
The competition was won around 11 years ago, okay? So and the project is built now, I think, for 5 or 6. So we worked forever. The competition was done, we did the competition, and it was a group maybe of 6 people working on it, yeah? So it was 3 people from our office and 3 people from the big office, all sitting together. And then we gave in the project, and then they gave 2 projects the first prize, or second prize actually. Another totally boring project and ours, yeah? And obviously they were totally scared. They said, we can't do your stupid stuff. I mean, you know, that's too crazy. We cannot do it. But then something that I didn't mention, but is very important, there was half of the money for this project was paid by a foundation. Okay, and this foundation actually really liked our project, and they pushed this project to happen because they wanted also to have something that is really special. They didn't want to finance something that is kind of normal, but they did want to see best value for their money, let's say. And so that the city, in the end, the idea was that the city would pay, let's say, for the standards that you need in any park, and anything that would be stupid would be paid by the foundation. So that gave us a certain plus. And then we had around probably an average of, and then we worked like 2 or 3 years on the planning with interruptions and also dramas. And yeah, and as you see, I'm working here for the project still, so it's an ongoing thing.
Thanks a lot. Well, people feel great when they're connected with the nature, and when we look on some urban spaces that could be rebuilt, for me it's like a possibility to bring the nature back to the city. And what I see there is lots of flat land and no grass, just like somewhere, and trees are like locked. They are like just can't hold the tree. Yeah? Well, and all the sculptures and things you've showed, they're great, but they also could stay in the park as well, and trees won't like make it worse. And so I'm looking for some purpose for this flat land. Why not to make it like more natural?
Well, first of all, this is the question is on which level we want to discuss this issue, because the question of nature is obviously a philosophical question, no? I mean, what is nature? Are you nature? You are Ukrainian, but are you nature? You know what I mean? I mean, it's a question of the egg and the hen, no? I mean, what was first? Are we not nature? So is everything we do not nature? Does nature have to be green? You know, I mean, or you're just a tree lover and you like trees and not asphalt. Asphalt is nature too. So this is a philosophical level of discussion. We can fly too. I came with a plane today, yeah, and I even had a drink in the plane. Yeah, I don't think birds can do that. Okay, but they can shit. Well, I didn't have a shit on the plane, but I had a pee. That the birds can do too. But drinking they cannot do. No, this is a philosophical question. But if it's an everyday question, I also like trees, by the way. And we planted many trees. In the pictures, maybe it wasn't as visible, but we had over 100 trees planted here. And obviously, they will be much more present when they get bigger. Okay, because they now have like 6-7 meters, and when they get bigger, they will also change the space, and maybe some of the sculptures and of the play objects will also disappear because they broke and because they don't have maybe so it depends on the moment that you look at the stuff, no? And so this is one question. As I misunderstood his question beforehand, it also has a lot to do with culture, you know, with, let's say, the romanticism or the nostalgia about nature that you might have or not have. You know, as I said, by the way, the people with the longest the longest longevity in Europe are the Italians, and they have the smallest amount of natural leftovers in their country. They ruined it totally, okay? So the Romans already started, so they have a long history of destroying whatever they found. But still, they live the longest, no? And we in Germany, we think we are nature lovers, you know? That's the reason we like to drink a lot, too, like you guys here, too. That's nice in nature. Vodka in nature is very nice, yeah? But it doesn't make vodka more healthy, no? So, it's not that simple, I would say, the question to be answered. But I think trees are nice, and I like trees, too, and I am happy to see a tree, but it depends on the project. This project, it's not about putting trees in every project, but this project was, I think, the contextuality of the migration issue was more relevant than maybe the nostalgic for trees. Maybe in another space, I would have a different opinion. I would say this context is actually better for a nostalgic. I am also nostalgic, yeah. So you are free in those terms. But one has to be careful in the use of the terms because, and you know, even if you would think that you are not nature, there is no space in the world that hasn't been touched by us. You know, we polluted the whole world, okay? So there is no nature left, okay? So then also, even if you would look at that from that perspective, you couldn't say that the tree or the grass that you plant is actually nature, no? Because it's not virgin, no? Even if you would think of separation between humans and nature. So we already took over. God left us. God died, and now we are in charge of the planet. So you can do a lot of natural parks everywhere. Maybe not in the center of the city, no? But there are many places that would need really to be looked after that we are destroying. The oceans, for example. And sometimes faking these kind of natural places in the cities create maybe the opposite. If you think dialectical, they might even produce this kind of, you feel good. You know, in Germany, we are masters in separating garbage. And we do it so well that after we divided all the stupid garbage, they have to remix it afterwards because they don't know how to use it for. There is not enough recyclable possibilities for all the stuff that we subdivide. No one tells us that, of course. Otherwise, we would stop doing it. And we are really good at it. Yeah? So that we have to also look at things. Are they really what they seem to be, or is it fake? You know? When we fake openly. Everyone can see this is fake. Okay? Other people, like Donald Trump, or your politicians here as well, they don't fake openly. And this is a little bit this nature game. You are kind of faking nature, and it looks like nature, but it's actually totally not adequate for the space, needs a lot of maintenance, a lot of energy. It destroys actually the environment just to make someone feel good about seeing a tree. You know, so you have to think if it's ethical and if the value of nature is the same value of nature that you are really thinking of, you know. The environment people, sorry that I have to, this is like the main issue in my profession, you know. We are landscape architects, so that's like the first question, what is actually nature, no? The environment people in Germany, they are against the windmills, for example, you know. So you would think, actually, windmills, sorry guys, that's good. We don't need to burn oil or coal, so it's good to have them. But they say, and there you can say how romantic and nostalgic they actually are, they say they destroy the landscape. You know, but they have just a picturesque aspect of the landscape. They think of the landscape as, and I don't care if it destroys the landscape. I'm happy if the air that I breathe and the water that I drink is clean. No? So I'm happy about any power plant is not being done by nuclear or by coal or whatever. So I'm happy about any windmill put in the landscape, even if it ruins the picture of it. So, and there are always misunderstandings. When people speak about nature like you did, with all respect, they think of a romantic, picturesque picture of it, but not of the moral, ethical relevance of it. Yeah? Sorry.
Thank you. Яке безневинне було питання, між іншим. Ну що, дорогі друзі, перш ніж ми подякуємо, я хочу сказати, що в мене буде 2 коротких коментаря після того, як ми подякуємо, тому посидіть ще буквально кілька секунд. А наразі, бурхливі, як на мене, і цілком заслужені оплески. Мартін Rein-Cano, thank you very much.